So, guys, Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, one of my favorite characters from original Star Trek. What about you? He is a fan favorite, and we're going to go over a lot about Bones as Captain Kirk, his friend, his leader commander on the Enterprise. We're going to go over a lot about Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy and DeForest Kelly, the actor who brought him to life. So Captain Kirk calls Dr. McCoy Bones. As you Trekkers know, no other character, nobody else on Star Trek calls him Bones that I can recall. Can you? So it's a Captain, a Kirk friend nickname. And I believe it's a pretty common nickname for doctors. Over the years, I've heard other, doctor characters and read articles that that's a sort of a common nickname. So it's certainly not unique in the world. But on Star Trek, of course, it is all about Dr. McCoy, Bones. So before we knew DeForest Kelly as Dr. McCoy, in feature films, in many films, he played the villain. In movies such as Warlock with Henry Fonda, and in Gunfight at the OK Corral, lots of westerns. And many Trekkers might know that Gene Roddenberry, offered DeForest Kelly the role of Spock first. He declined it, and of course then played Bones. In the late 90s, DeForest Kelly gave an interview where he said his biggest fear would be on his gravestone would be carved, "He's dead, Jim," which of course was one of his most famous lines. And this is really cool. Over the years, DeForest Kelly's portrayal of Bones inspired many, many people to become doctors. Here's a quote. "That's something that very few people can say they've done. I'm proud to say that I have." So over the years, Dr. McCoy became the old country doctor, right? The Southern gentleman. And I think that's basically one of the reasons why people could relate to him so much. We have all this future technology, the great Enterprise, the phasers, the tricorders, his sick bay, which was basically sort of a computer lab that he'd say later on in the motion picture. But certainly we were surrounded by technology. But then we had Bones in Star Trek, sort of almost our surrogate, like we were there. And he was certainly a man of science and a future man, but he was also just an old country doctor. And speaking of technology, probably the most incredible, magical, and just wonderful technology in Star Trek is, of course, the transporter, something that Dr. McCoy is not a fan of. He's someone who would rather travel by shuttlecraft or anywhere else, any way else than the transporter. And it's very important because you figure, hey, look, we'd love to be able to be in a Star Trek world where there is transportation, teleportation instantly or so. But as we know, over the course of Star Trek's run, there are accidents. It happens more than once. And Bones is there to say, you know what? Be careful. If you can take a shuttlecraft or anyone else, do that. Bones and Spock. Dr. McCoy and Mr. Spock. You can't get better in Star Trek. I defy any Star Trek fan to go over the shows, the movies, and pick two other characters that are more entertaining, that are more funny. They're the original comic duo. Later you'd have Data and Geordi, say. In Deep Space Nine, you'd have Quark and Odo. I love Quark and Odo. They're great. And then Tuvok and Neelix and Voyager, which of course is very much patterned after Spock and Bones. But the emotional, the logic clash between the always logical and in control Mr. Spock and the emotional, passionate Dr. McCoy is one of the foundations of original Star Trek and just Star Trek. The idea that we're always probing with our mind, intellectualism, logic, reason, but we have a heart, a soul, a passion to take that information, to take those experiences and filter them. So there's no better duo. And then of course Captain Kirk would come in and sort of moderate and mediate and sort of coach and say, okay, guys, and sort of, come between them, or have to moderate the discussions, which got incredibly lively. And finally, of all the Star Trek characters, of all their powers, their abilities, their title, right, their rank in Starfleet, or then in Deep Space Nine, you had, of course, Odo and Kira, from Bajor, and the alien sort of you know titles and powers and abilities. That's great. Everything's great, right? But with Bones, with Dr. McCoy as Chief Medical Officer, shared, of course, same rank and powers and title as, say, Dr. Beverly Crusher, Dr. Bashir, even the holodeck. The point is that these are the most, I would argue, the most powerful people in Starfleet. Why? Because, as we know, they're the only officer that can take away the captain's power because of a medical issue, because of a medical emergency, or due to that physician's, that chief medical officer's guidance and advice. Not only that, not only can they remove the captain, they can remove any other officer from active duty, and I'm sure they can recommend to Starfleet someone to go in their place, certainly by their recommendation, their report. So you've got an officer, you've got that person who's in charge of sickbay and chief medical officer title and rank. They have almost the most power of almost any officer if they choose to exercise it. And we know Bones has, Dr. Crusher has over the years, the idea of that chief medical officer having more power in ways, or just as much as almost anyone in Starfleet. So is Bones the glue of Star Trek? Is he the foundation? Certainly one of the foundation building blocks of Star Trek. Kirk, Bones, and Spock. Captain Kirk, Dr. McCoy, and Mr. Spock. And I love Uhura and Chekhov and Sulu. I love Scotty. I love the transporter chief Kyle, Nurse Chapel. Sure, but the foundation of that show, which carried into the films and was modeled, after all the other series, the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, all that sort of trio, sort of that friendship. Starfleet officers, they have to be in their military-esque conversation, or but they're also people, and their civilian conversations, their human dialogues are what we love. There you go, Bones, one of my favorites. Hope he's yours. Hope you're enjoying. Hope you're subscribing. See you soon.